Artifacts! We all love them. But don't you agree that there aren't enough? Artifacts can fully change the way the game is played, for better or for worse, and as far as concepts for them go, the possibilities are endless. With help from my Discord, I asked my viewers to give me their best and worst artifact concepts, so I could rank them on a scale of ones I'd be alright without to ones I'd love to see in the game someday. Remember, if an artifact ranked low, that doesn't necessarily mean I don't like it. All of these would be interesting and fun to see in the game, it's just that some will definitely be more viable than others, and also I got a ton of submissions, so I limited myself to 25. With all that said, thank you to Swizik who made a couple of the artifact icons, and let's get into it. Our first new artifact is the Artifact of Betrayal. This artifact is simple in nature, but has a couple major flaws, I think. What it does is that every time you kill an enemy, they become an ally, and every time one of your allies dies, they become an enemy. This is an interesting idea, however it falls off a bit because of a few things. First is, would it ever stop cycling? If not, nothing would die, and I feel like, as silly as it sounds, this would get incredibly frustrating. Second is, how would this work with Mithrix and the other final bosses? Would they suddenly change sides? Would you be able to leave? How would that even work? As many questions as I have to recognize that this is how most concepts start. Whether they are for items, artifact, or otherwise, every concept starts somewhere, and the real challenge and fun to it is the workshopping, at least for me. I do think a lot of the lower artifacts on this list can be viable after a bit of tweaking, but whether it was that they were too complicated or not impactful enough, some were just worse than others. The next artifact on our list is the Artifact of Bloodthirst. This artifact is fun, but I don't know, something about it just rubs me the wrong way. Activating this artifact makes it so that you will take an undefined amount of damage over time, and all of your healing is halved. The trade-off being now that you have 25% lifesteal. I feel like the reason I don't love this is because with all of these, I tried to look at them from an extra perspective of what it would be like to use them with every artifact on. Because of this, I feel like the Artifact of Bloodthirst would cause a lot of very annoying deaths, even if it were the only artifact active. This artifact holds you back as well, in that it stops you from being able to stay in a stage after the teleporter fight is completed, as there will be no way to stop the damage from killing you. It also could be really punishing in these moments where the game just decides not to spawn anything, which is significantly worse after the Seekers of the Storm update. There are people walking around upstairs and it's ruining my recording. I really want this artifact, but unfortunately I feel like it could just cause a lot more struggle than it would be fun. This next artifact falls behind because of one major aspect, and that is tediousness. It is the Artifact of Design, and what it does is allow you to pick an item at the start of every stage, and in turn, this item is the only one that will be dropped by any means during that stage. This seems pretty good, however, I feel like the introduction of a complete pause at the start of every game to pick an item would kinda ruin the flow of the game. I think it's still a good idea for an artifact, and from now on, all of the artifacts are ones I do think should be in the game, but I feel like this one would throw me off a bit, and would be yet another pop-up menu. I do like the idea that you could just pick a symbiotic scorpion up or something, and have every chest drop it on stage 1, but it does beg the question of how this would work with command, or if it would even work at all. Next is the Artifact of Corruption. This simply converts all of your healing into added damage, which sounds pretty fun on paper. I think this artifact struggles a bit though, because that conversion from healing to damage can get very aggressive very quickly. I think that artifacts that make you ridiculously overpowered kind of lose their fun factor pretty quickly, and so for that reason, I'm popping this one lower on the list. This one is kind of complicated, so bear with me. It is the Artifact of Investment, and changes your game in a very weird way. At the end of every stage, the enemy's level, the difficulty timer, and all of your items are reset to 0, making each stage effectively the first one, except on a different map. Then, once you get to the moon, or assumedly the Prime Meridian as well, all of the enemy's levels, the time that was reset, and the items that you lost are given to you to match what they could have been. This makes it so that the final stage is effectively a completely new run that is just full of chaos. I like this artifact, but I'm kind of a bit confused. If anything, this kind of just makes the run easier. It makes the stages go a bit slower, sure, but I feel like it really wouldn't change all that much. I'm just kinda confused on the intricacies of this one, so I'll leave it up to y'all in the comments to figure it out. These next two are low on the list, but not really because they are bad. The first is the artifact of shifting, and all it does is shuffle all the player is in the game's items equally, so they all have the same amount of each rarity. This would kind of solve the issue of players either accidentally or intentionally taking more than one of their share of items in a run, and I love it. I'm going to move on to the next one and then explain why I don't love these. The next one is the artifact of unity. This is incredibly simple as well, making all players in the game share an inventory. This one absolutely should be in the game, as I think it's incredibly fun, and also a great way to measure your skill versus one of your friends, as the luck of item drops is no longer an issue. The reason I'm not a huge fan of the artifact of shifting in Unity is because they only work in multiplayer. In single player, these literally do nothing, and while there could be a case for the artifact of shifting randomizing your build in single player, I'm not sure that that was intended by the creator. I think that the best artifacts are viable in both single and multiplayer, and these two unfortunately fail at that. Chaos is pretty fun, and that's just what you'll get with the artifact of Havoc. All it does is make it so that when you pick up an item, you get a random buff or debuff. I'd assume that this includes permanent effects as well, which just adds to the chaos. Sure, you could get an extra life from the new Shrine of Spirit, but you could also get a permanent Spinal Tonic curse. I think this is a lot of fun, but I only put it low because there are a lot of weird debuffs and buffs that wouldn't really do anything when you got them. Like, the Overheat debuff from the Grandparents doesn't actually do anything except make you take additional fire damage. And there are many character-specific buffs that wouldn't really do anything, like Mercenary's Exposed effect. This could obviously be avoided by blacklisting these effects, but still, where it stands right now, it's just okay. This next one is kind of just two existing artifacts smashed together into one semi-unique artifact concept. It is the artifact of Climax, and what it does is duplicate all boss enemy spawns and give them a 50% chance to drop an item on death. I like this, however, it's kind of just Sacrifice and Swarms combined into one, which is fine because it kind of works. I don't have a ton to say about this one, as it really isn't that special. It's still a good one, though. As for all of these, I have no idea how they would actually work, as they aren't in the game. If you're a modder, though, as always, you have the power to change that, and I'd love you forever if you did. This next artifact should honestly just be base kit for the game. It is the artifact of Legions, and all it does is make it so that the enemies are always or consistently spawning, instead of in waves, as well as increasing the enemy cap by 20%. This would make there be more enemies to fight, of course, but it would also remove all of those annoying moments of downtime in which you are just not doing anything and you can't do anything because nothing is spawning. Straight up, just make this base kit. I hate those moments and want them gone immediately. The artifact of Adaptability is a silly one, simply changing all chest and multi-shop spawns into adaptive chests. This one makes a lot of sense to me, and, in a way, is kind of just the artifact of Command with extra steps. It wouldn't really change the game all that much. And if you didn't want to waste your time with the chest, you could just spam the interact button to take whatever the first item was. I think this would be fun and engaging to play with, especially with all artifacts on, as it'd just be one extra thing that makes the game just that little bit more chaotic. The artifact of Uncertainty is one I'm sure we've all wanted. Every time you activate an ability, it will instead activate a completely different survivor ability of the same type. To clarify, using Huntress's Laser Glaive could randomize into Captain's Taser, or activating Akrid's Leap could instead be Commando's Roll. This sounds pretty good, but similar to the artifact of Havoc from earlier, there are a lot of abilities that either don't work with a single input, like Captain's Beacons or Multi's Retool, or they just wouldn't do anything, like Railgunner's Scope. Also confusing about this is how it would work with your primary skill. Would each shot be random, or would it be random each time you press the ability? Either way, I think this could be done well, especially with the next artifact. This artifact is the artifact of Onslaught, which is basically just the gesture of the drowned, except for your abilities. All it does is half your cooldowns while simultaneously making them activate automatically. This would combo incredibly well with the previous artifact of Uncertainty, and would be a lot of fun. The only problem I have with it is that some abilities don't have cooldowns, and thus would never activate or always be activating. This could cause some pretty annoying visual effects as well, and personally, being unable to control my movement abilities would get really annoying after like 3 minutes, or after the second time I get pushed off the map by accident. Next up is the artifact of Conductivity, and is the first one on this list that I genuinely think should be in the game immediately, or at least a version of it should be. This artifact simply makes it so that the lightning from the Prime Meridian and False Sun boss fight that forces you to keep moving is just always active, making you unable to sit still. This would be similar to a constantly active glowing meteor, except the difference being it wouldn't really affect the enemies unless you were standing on top of them. Because of this though, it would be really fun to metagame by standing on top of a wandering vagrant, making the lightning affect them too. I love artifacts that are simple but also ones that you can't easily avoid. This would truly be game-changing, and I would love it if it were in the game. This next one is for the collectors out there. The artifact of Mimicry is a bit deceptively named, making it so that you can only hold one of every item, and every time you pick up a duplicate item, it is changed into one you don't already have. This would make for a really unique challenge that I love the idea of, causing chaos without completely ruining the game. A lot of items are a bit useless on only one stack though, so I feel like this might get a bit annoying after a run or two. Like, I've never really been happy to hold only one mocha, you know? The artifact of Asphyxiation, also known as the artifact of being difficult to spell, simply fills each stage with void fog. Inspired by dead cells, there would also be cell vents around from the void fields that you could activate in exchange for some gold to stay out of the void fog. Additionally, the teleporter zone and things like the pillar's holdout zones would also shield you from the fog, making this challenge not impossible but very difficult. I think this would be a ton of fun to try, but there is a chance that the visual effects of the void fog on the screen might bother some people. I still love it though and want to play with it immediately. Ninth place is the artifact of Theft, which I think encapsulates exactly what a peak artifact should. This artifact makes it so that enemies have an undefined chance to steal one of your items when they hit you, returning that item on death. This would be so much fun, especially during the Mithrix fight. It's funny to think about you trading items back and forth with him as you dealt damage to each other. It would be rewarding to fight an enemy that had taken something valuable from you and would genuinely just be so much fun to use. The artifact of Impatience is up next, and is just silly. All it does is make it so that any shrine will automatically activate when you get near it. This distance is undefined, but I'd imagine that it is enough to make it so that you couldn't really avoid it. From Shrines of Chance stealing your money when you don't want them to, or Shrines of Blood nearly killing you at the most inopportune moments, this artifact would be super rewarding for players who took the time to practice their pathing and awareness in the game. Tons of fun, and I want it now. The artifact of Darkness is another one I'm sure a lot of people have thought of. This artifact makes it so that the world is hidden in a heavy, opaque fog that you could barely see through. I think that there would be some amount of distance from your character that you could see fine, something like 10 meters, just so that the game was playable. But it would still be interesting and fun to randomly run into a Beetle Queen that you didn't know was there. I believe there is a modded version of this that makes it so that during the teleporter event, being outside of the holdout zones makes you nearly blind. I love that one, and think this concept version would do it just that little bit better. In 6th place, just barely not making it into the top 5, we have one that I truly love. The artifact of Addition simply allows you to open a chest a second time for another item in exchange for 50% of your health. This is the perfect artifact in my opinion. It modifies the game to make it so that you could potentially get a god run really early in exchange for making you risk your life. I just know my greedy ass would be instantly activating every chest as many times as I could, and then act surprised when I died because of it. Again, modders, I'm begging you to add these. I'm honestly surprised this next one isn't in the game. This artifact is called Multitudes, and all it does is give elite enemies that spawn a small chance to have multiple elite affixes on on them. I think this should really just be base kit again, especially after looping. It would be so fun to activate like 4 mountain shrines and see a blazing, mending, overloading stone titan eviscerate you and your loved ones by simply thinking about it. It would be super rewarding to beat these absolute powerhouses, especially if there was a small added effect that allowed the final bosses in the game to get the affixes as well. It would make the game more interesting, and that's all that matters in the end. Do you like the game super hot? Well, now it's in Risk of Rain 2, with the artifact of Kronos. This artifact simply makes it so that the in-game timer and difficulty scaling would now only move when you do, meaning that the speed of the game is entirely up to you. I think a cool addition to this would be to make the holdout zones also have this effect, meaning you could take a breather in the teleporter by just standing in it, but would effectively pause the game while doing so. Also included here is that the timer would move doubly as fast when you're sprinting, making the game incredibly difficult if you ran everywhere. But the real, actual reason this artifact made it into the 4th place is that it would finally give the Bungus a use, and that is really all that matters. Top 3 time, and we're starting off with the artifact of Deception, which makes it so that every chest you open is cheaper at the cost of spawning enemies around it. This is so much fun, and is basically like that lunar item that no one uses that spawns enemies when you use shrines, but in artifact form. I love me a mimic from D&D, and this is basically that with extra steps. I need it immediately. Second place is the natural predecessor to the Artifact of Metamorphosis, and is the Artifact of Change. This artifact simply randomizes all of your items at the start of every stage, keeping them within their rarity. Super fun overall. I always find it a bit difficult to talk about the best things on these ranking videos because, like, what more is there to say other than that I just like them? There isn't much more to say about it than that. Also, this artifact would be good for at least 4 videos worth of free content, so you know I'd use it way too much. First place here, and some of you might be a bit surprised, as this artifact is incredibly simple. All this artifact does is completely randomize the maps that appear on each stage, which I think needs to be in the game immediately. You could start on Sky Meadows and end on the Titanic Plains, making the whole run feel different, even if it really didn't change much about how the game is played. What would be even cooler is if Hidden Realms were also included in this randomization. Let me fight the Artifact Reliquary at the Treeborn Colony, or let me play a normal stage in the Bazaar Between Time. Would it be balanced like this, considering the size of some of the Hidden Realms? Not even a little bit. But that's the point. It would genuinely be a fun challenge to play the game on these maps in a way that they usually aren't played in. Obviously, maps with mandatory parts like the Prime Meridian and Commencement arenas would need to stay as is, but still, I think this could be done pretty well, and I want to play with it immediately. And that's all, folks. I appreciate you for watching through the whole video. Let me know what you thought about these concepts, as well as letting me know about some of your own artifact concepts in the comments below. I urge you to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, as it helps me out a ton. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel by going the extra mile, and thank you again for watching. The word artifact was said 78 times in this video, and yeah, bye-bye. Also, yes, I know that my voice was used in the intro of Pyrocynical's video the other day on his Disaster of the Seekers of the Storm update video. I'm not happy about it because I was not credited or asked for use of the clip, but unfortunately there isn't much I can do about it. None of the people in the intro of that video were credited either, which is just a mistake by his editors, and I doubt that if I were to be credited that anyone would have came to my channel because of it. I'd like to keep my opinion on this situation to myself on a professional level, so I'm going to leave this discourse here. Anyways, yeah, subscribe to Song Needle now.